the first thing that I want to do is just go around and have everybody introduce themselves. Just let people know, including the other panelists, who you are, what you do at UT, and then maybe sort of like where you're from, something like that. So I'll start. I'm Emil Kressel. I'm the Director of Learning and Development here at the University of Texas. We are a new program. We've only been around for, I guess, a year and a half or so now. And one of the first programs we started was UT Reads, which is this effort to try and get everybody at UT to read the same book and have small group discussions. And the first book we did was Sword and Shield. That was in the fall. And now we're doing a summer version. And this panel is kind of the culmination of this campaign. So I'm from Minnesota, and I went to school in Madison, Wisconsin, which is what Brianna's background is there at Lake Mendota, the Terrace, amazing spot. But I'll let her maybe talk a little bit about that. Thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for the panelists for taking the time. I'm really looking forward to this 3-part series. Gordon, do you want to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Gordon. I'm the Employee Engagement Coordinator for the Facilities Department here on campus. Been doing that for about 3 years, but been on campus since 2009. I'm originally from Northwest Missouri, middle of nowhere. But I went to school here in Austin, actually over at Houston-Tillotson University. And I'll pass it to Brianna.
Hi, I'm Brianna Duran. I'm the Campus Environmental Center Coordinator for the Office of Sustainability. I've been in that role and at UT for just over 4 years. And yeah, I'm from rural Wisconsin. I went to UW, just like Emil, which is cool. And yeah, Terrace is the best place in town. Beer, brats, lake view, sunshine. It's amazing. So if you ever go to the Midwest, visit Madison and go to the Terrace. Also, ice cream made on campus, which is cool. I'll pass to Karen.
I'm Karen Towner. I'm the Director over Strategic Workforce Solutions here in HR. We do a lot with employee relations, staffing, compensation, really just kind of like a hodgepodge of fun topics. I am originally from Houston, Texas. I went to Texas A&M for my undergrad, and then went to George Washington University in DC for my master's degree. And I've been at UT for, gosh, I think 11 years, maybe almost 12. Yeah, so a while. And I'll pass it on to
Mavis. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Like, no worries. Hello, everyone. My name is Canavis Smith, and I'm with the Texas Engineering Executive Education Program. We are the professional development and continuing education arm of the Cockrell School of Engineering. I'm so happy to be here. I've been with UT since 2016, and I'm happy to be back. This is my alma mater. Went to McCombs for undergrad and grad school. So yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Great, thanks everybody. So again, just as a reminder, people who are joining us as just attendees, feel free to put questions in the Q&A, comments, chat amongst yourselves in the chat. They're open. We'll kind of just go in sequence. I should also let the people who are attending know that we're going up to through parts 1 and 2 today. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to go and try and cover almost the rest of the book. And then the third session, the author, Elizabeth McCracken, is going to join us. And we'll try and make up anything that we weren't able to capture in the second session, but we're hoping to do everything. In terms of where that is in the story, parts 1 and 2, the last chapter that we're going to try and cover today is titled Joe Ware Evaporates, which, if you're using a hard copy, starts on page 167. So we'll try and get there, but we're going to try and keep this fairly organic. But just to start us out, and on the chat, if you could answer, I already know the answer for the panelists, but for attendees, let us know if you have ever read Elizabeth McCracken before, if you're a fiction fan, if this is your first fiction book you've ever read. I read a good amount of fiction. I've always loved fiction. I had an undergrad in creative writing, so I was forced to read fiction for 4 years, but I also really enjoy it. And I'll start in terms of, let's just kind of give initial impressions, like the first, I don't know, 100 pages or so. Or my first impression was that I really enjoyed the humor. It's so, I think that one of the critics called it oddball sort of fiction, and I agree with that. And I like it. I can definitely see that it may not be for everybody, because you have to kind of be invested in it. And just like all things strangeness isn't for everybody, but it is for me. So I've really enjoyed it. Anybody else want to give just kind of their initial takes? And I should say, you're free to, whatever your opinion is, you don't have to be, you don't have to like it.
I'll jump in. Like I did. I also really liked it, especially like I got hooked in, which I was a little not surprised at. I don't generally like, you know, I'm odd, I'm weird. But I'm kind of picky about how people use adjectives and if they get too descriptive. But I really enjoyed kind of how she described Bertha and like the cadence of the writing. You know, I really enjoyed the beginning. I was like, oh, this is lighthearted and kind of fun, and what's going to happen and where did she come from. So I really enjoyed it. And I think there were some things that I was comparing to situations that I was figuring out at the time too.
Interesting.
Yeah, I don't typically read a lot of fiction. This is probably the first fiction book that I've read in probably since college. Honestly, I usually read more of like professional development, leadership, organizational culture kind of things, nonfiction. But it's really interesting. And you mentioned that, Karen, about the adjectives. It's like someone who needs that to be able to engage. Like I need like super intense like descriptions and adjectives. All of that stuff really helped me connect with it a lot more. And then as a person who has ADHD, like I really appreciate just how like discombobulated the entire thing has been. It's just like, go over here, nope, no, we're gonna go over here, no, we're gonna go over here, we're gonna follow these people. So it keeps me on my toes. I don't want to get bored when which typically the reason I don't read a lot of like fiction is just like, okay, like I know what's gonna happen. And then this one just keeps throwing you for loops.
I definitely agree. I think you didn't know what was coming next, so you didn't know what to expect. And also the dialogue, the retorts, like when people snap back with something pretty catchy. Bertha was really good about it, but it's just that conversation piece. I find that interesting as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking a good word, discombobulation. That is definitely what's happening. I'm not sure that I love that. I find myself having to go back and reread, like, wait, is that
too.
like what just happened? Like it's a little, sometimes I find it a little difficult to follow, but it's a fun, different read. I love fiction. I'm more of like fantasy, epic fiction kind of reading, but so this is a nice change of pace, kind of like a light read though. Like I said, the discombobulation makes it, I think, a little more challenging to like, wait, what's happening? And also like the mysterious nature of it all, which I like what is the deal with Bertha? Where did she come from? And that whole thing, the mystery of it, I find appealing and fun. But
I've had to like stop myself from like building one of those like CSI crime games.
Like red
pieces
string
together. Yeah.
Red string, everything.
And
well,
I was gonna say, I'm maybe I guess this is controversial, but a lot of times I will go and read the end first. Like
my mother did that. It drove me bonkers.
Oh,
wow.
And I did it because I was like, no, I want to try to like it because usually I'm like, oh, am I right? Is this how it's going to end or whatever? And I haven't with this book because I'm like, I just kind of want to see like what happens. I can't figure it out. I have no idea where things are going. And so in a way, it was kind of different for me because I'm like, no, I'm not going to skip ahead.
So have you finished the book?
Almost.
Okay. All right.
But I won't let anything out.
I mean, compared to how the rest of it has been going so far, I don't know that reading the end would do you any good. It's not really a linear story. I feel like as far as like I've made it, which I think I'm getting pretty close to the end as well. I feel like it's spanning like 150 years. So it's just like you're in this scene and then just like boom, it's 15 years later. And I'm like, whoa.
Right. Yeah, it's more of a character connection than anything
relationship.
Else. Yeah,
for
exactly.
sure. It's not so. I mean, definitely, it's an interesting story, but it's the relationship among the characters is a huge part of it. So, what did you think about the beginning? The story begins in a graveyard, which has its own things in terms of like fiction. There's a lot of baggage there. But also she is like born, like she's almost like there's no history to her. It seems like she kind of almost dropped out of the sky. And it was a very mystical or fantastical introduction to what this is sort of another question. Like, is she the main character? Is she? Anyways, we'll cover that anyways. That what it seems to be a hero. What did you think about that introduction? And Karen, you already kind of touched on it, but.
Yeah, I typically, like if I'm choosing books for myself, I'll usually read like the back cover or something, right? Like the general kind of summary. And I didn't. I just like jumped right, like you told me the book and like I got it and I jumped into it. So that when it started, I was like, is this like a murder mystery? Like this random lady shows up in the cemetery. Like, are people about to start getting like killed? Like, I don't know what to expect in this book. And so that I thought it was I feel like it was done on purpose. But I'm not sure why. But like compared to the feeling of going forward in the book, it seems like kind of the like most mysterious, like dark part of the book.
Right. Yeah. Early on in the book, it was more like a phoenix rising from the ashes or something. I didn't know where it was coming from. I didn't know what it was going to explain. So that mystery kept me intrigued. And so I did like that a part of the book and part of the beginning of the story. So
my immediate thought was Rip Van Winkle, which I know at some point they mentioned Rip Van Winkle, but like
reference there.
That whole thing felt like that story, right? Like, I don't know that Rip Van Winkle wakes up in a graveyard. I don't know that level of detail, but like the bowling thing was part of Rip Van Winkle and like going back in time and just like showing up. Anyway, so I like waiting to see if she like fell asleep for 100 years and woke up something.
Yeah, at first I was like, did she purposely decide to go to sleep in the cemetery? Like, how did she end up there? Was she like dropped out of a car? Was she like visiting someone? But then it's like, I feel like it jumped into like, she knew who she was, like she didn't have amnesia, like, and then I was just like, where'd all the money? Like, did she carry all the money in like a bag? It's not like in that time you'd be like, oh, let me go to the Chase and reactivate my account.
Yeah, because you don't know what time we're in either.
Right. Yeah. Then you just, I didn't know until later. But the cemetery part didn't really like freak me out or anything. I just thought like, oh, maybe she was taking a nap. Maybe she was having some lunch and fell asleep. I don't know.
I think like go ahead, Brianna.
Oh, I was just going to say one piece of that initial scene that really stuck out to me and still like as an image in my head is after she gets up, the impression of her body on the ground and how they said years later you could still see it. To me, that just like set her up as this like mythical legend, like who, that stories of her live on for generations.
right? There was a talk about like people were dreaming about her, and that they would. She was like the what did they call it? The Salford Devil, right? There was like that whole mystic thing behind it. But like when they were first asking the questions to her, like when they found her, like, who are you? All this stuff. I was like, man, this lady's running from something. Like some went on, and she just like up and just like, I'm gonna restart my life. And I was like, I don't know how you could do that. I'm like, personally, but that just seems crazy.
That comes to, they sort of start to explain that. So had anybody heard of Candlepin Bowling before?
I had not, no.
Yeah.
I'm still trying to like picture it.
Yeah.
I haven't looked it up yet. I should.
I looked it up. I looked it up this morning because in my head I just kept imagining like actual little tiny candles.
Yes.
And, like a tiny like marble ball, and it was like like jacks or something. But yeah.
They said the ball was 2.5 pounds. That's all I
so
remember.
it's about the size like a child can hold it. So it wasn't
right.
It's traditional bowling ball size.
So I watched like some YouTube videos.
Yes,
it's like they're like fanatics out there. Right. It's pretty interesting, but it is a thing where nobody has bowled a perfect game before, which is like astounding to me. Like, how is that possible? But
possible, exactly.
So
really big
do you
on the
think
East Coast in Canada, supposedly?
Yeah. So I guess that's why I'm sure people on the East Coast, it's more of a thing, they know about it, but I sure hadn't heard of it. Do you think there's a reason why she chose that particular game? Maybe because it's so odd?
I mean, I think the bowling may be linked to the Rip Van Winkle story, but just bowling in general.
Do you know more about? I didn't know that there was a.
Okay, I will be completely honest. What I know about that story is from watching Wishbone the dog on PBS as a kid. So, for those of you from the same generation as me, and I just know bowling was involved, but that's as far as it goes, my knowledge. I haven't actually read the story of Rip Van Winkle, but I think that might be the link to bowling. And I wonder about the Candlepin, if that's a popular game or a well-known kind of cultural game in that area. So and maybe it's an unknown to most people. It kind of makes it weird and unique.
Adds to the mysticism. Well, that might be another question. We should think of questions that we can ask Elizabeth McCracken when she joined us, so we can ask her things like, is there some or tie to Rip Van Winkle? Same goes for attending. Yeah.
I hope I'm remembering. If anybody else like in the chat, feel free to correct me. I could be wrong.
I watched a lot of Wishbone, but I don't remember that one specifically.
That's a good one.
Okay, so let's get on to the kind of big scene in these first pages, which is the Molasses Flood. What are your thoughts on this?
I thought it was like a dream.
Me too.
For like a long time. And I was like, she's just like, wake up. Like, this story is so like outlandish, ridiculous. And then it turns out it happened in like real life.
It is a real thing. I'm going to drop a link into the chat from the History Channel, but I don't know, maybe there's nothing gruesome here, but the concept is gruesome. So I don't know, trigger warning, I guess, but there are no like horrible images, but there are pictures of the aftermath of the flood. So I'm going to drop that in the chat.
It made me think of somebody being like covered in amber, like stuck in an amber,
like quicksand. It seems like a horrible,
or like preserved for eternity in this, like I'm imagining Bertha like covered in amber in a museum or something, it just like to me fits with this like legend of like she could live forever,
like the mosquito in Jurassic Park.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, I thought at first it was like another elaborate scheme of hers to like disappear and create a new life someplace else. I was like,
too.
I wonder where she went now.
That's what I thought too. I didn't believe that she died.
Flood is pretty elaborate.
Molasses out of all things. I wasn't sure if that symbolized something. I don't know what you guys thought.
So my theory, I don't know about symbolism, but for me, it's sort of McCracken style, because like there's like molasses is funny, like getting stuck in molasses is funny. But this is just horrific. Like, what a way to go. Like such a gruesome, gruesome thing. But the lead up to it is there's humor there. So that's kind of my, I don't know, I'm interested to hear like what her take on it was, but molasses is a funny substance.
And even after her death, and they're like, their feet are sticking to the ground, like when her friends go to look for her, like there's continues to sort of be elements of humor connected to her death, I guess, which is
Yeah.
It
it's
seems
awful.
like a way of, because I was talking about how, it'll be really descriptive in these parts, and then it just jumps like 15, 20 years. And it seems like Elizabeth McCracken was like picking certain like parts of this overall story to like expound upon like as much as humanly possible. And like to me, the molasses was kind of like that, like what's the like absolute slowest way that I can kill this character off, and keep talking about it for 2 chapters.
Yeah, because that's a legendary way to go too. And somebody, an attendee, says molasses is slow, so not being able to get away from it is funny. But on that link I sent, they explained that at some points, I mean, it's, thousands of gallons. So at some point it was moving at 35 miles per hour. So that's just, it's an astounding thing. It's also astounding that the first time I've ever heard of it.
Yes.
I wonder if the symbolism is like time, because time is sort of like stretched in weird ways in the book. And I feel like this idea that molasses is both slow and fast, and the death is both like fast and slow. I don't know. Maybe there's something there.
I like that. That makes
Symbolically.
sense. Yeah.
I like that too.
Okay, so let's get into go back a little bit, because it happened before the flood, obviously, because hopefully people who are watching this have read enough of this, but that's where Bertha dies, is in the Molasses Flood. But before she does that, she has a baby. What's that?
I said spoiler alert.
Spoiler alert. She has a baby, Minna, and that's an interesting birth, first of all. And then an interesting relationship with that daughter, for the brief relationship they have. What are your thoughts on those things?
I kind of thought like just in general that like her and Leviticus Sprague getting together just kind of like came up randomly out of nowhere. I'm like, what? They're like together now? And like it seemed odd at first, but then really understanding how their like personalities like complemented each other. And like she's this big loud like person, and so I was like, oh, I could see that working. But then I was like, oh, they're gonna have a kid. Like I thought they were like in my brain, like when I'm seeing these characters, I thought they were like in their 60s or something.
Yeah.
Which maybe
I think that's why she was. I think that's why she was surprised. Like, no, there is.
She said, "Not I."
No.
Well, and I think that giving, it's in the reading guide, but that fact that she gave birth like stuck between the 2 floors, again, it's making me think of time, right? Like, is this like a generational divide? Right. Is this like, is that what that's symbolizing in some way?
I was thinking race. Yeah. I was thinking more race in that one, in between the floors, because like the time period that they were in, her mother was white and her dad was black, and so like can't imagine like growing up mixed, like especially if she was fair skinned and like navigating that, being biracial.
Yeah, I was relating more to race as well, just because of the time period that I kind of pictured this during. This is way before like this, the Supreme Court case with Loving versus Virginia. It was, it's way before that time period. So you're dealing with a lot of dynamics outside of their home. And so this separation of blending them together, show some symbolism of that birth, that new child, that new beginning, that new era.
Interesting. Wow. Okay, so I have a note about Joe Ware. This is also on the guide, and I'll put the link to the. I think everybody who's watching knows this, but I'll put the link. There's a reader's guide that we created. So if you're having reading groups amongst yourself, and I'm taking some of these questions from that guide, but so another spoiler alert on page 122. Joe Ware discovers Leviticus Sprague, and he's dead. Do you remember that scene?
That was some well done like imagery, because I like in my brain there's like he's like, and then there's just a leg.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing and a leg. And I'm thinking like, how does that even happen? And like it gets further into talking about like spontaneous combustion or whatever. And I was like, how did somebody just like come in there and just like, did he chop off his own leg to like fake his own death? Like, I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him.
So let me read it. This is at the top of 122 again in the book. That morning, Joe Ware had opened the door to the alleys and was knocked back by an appalling smell. The smell had been in his nose already, he realized. Distant sugar through the floorboards, but obscene close up. Sweet with hell and flesh beneath. All horrifying odors are nearly pleasant in tiny doses. Now he thought he might faint from it. In the corner, the darkened mystery. Incinerated chair, melted table, the metal stem drooping like a dying thing. No sign of a man except the object on the ground. So pretty gruesome. And I did write a note, and at that point, I was sort of trying to get her rhythm, like Elizabeth McCracken's, like her MO. And I felt like her thing is like to create something really lovingly and like get you to really invest in it, like Bertha or Sprague, and then kill it.
Yes.
Just rip it out from underneath, and not in a not gentle way, right?
Yeah, the people that I thought were going to be main characters throughout the story were
Right.
just wiped away immediately, and I was just like, the people I started to love.
I feel like with the Molasses and then with that one, and I'm trying to think of any other. I don't know that there was any other deaths that happened in that early part, but I was thinking back to they used to have this show. I think it was like on MTV. It was called 1,000 Ways to Die, and there's just all these like crazy, ridiculous ways that like actual people had died before. And I feel like those two would have been ones that were definitely like on that show.
Yeah.
And then my brain started going into the physics of like, people don't just spontaneously combust, but the fire department said there was no accelerants. And I was like, oh, this is like 1930s fire department. Like, I don't know what they're talking about.
Right. Karen.
And I guess she had built up too, because like she gives like little hints, like I think at one point she had even said about Leviticus, like, wow, what an awful way it was going to be for him to die. And then he was scared of fire and all of that. So I was pretty sure he was going to get burned. I didn't expect like
there was a little foreshadowing that I missed.
Yeah, she has a little foreshadowing. But yeah, it's and then the disappearing, like, because I was like, where'd Margaret and Minna go? Like, surely we're not done with them. Like, okay, they got on the train. See you later. Like,
that one felt like a soap opera.
Right.
Coming back.
I was like, is Margaret going to steal her? Like, what is that, are we just going to be left wondering? Anyways.
So what do you guys think about the fact that Bertha dies slowly by Molasses, kind of juxtaposed against Sprague dying like
it's like instantaneously.
Yeah, like what's going on there? Those are two very different ways, and one is like drowning in a flood and one is fire.
Right.
And they're like almost the complete opposites of like what you would portray like their personality to be.
Exactly.
Like if you're saying like somebody like Bertha Druid, who's like loud and rambunctious, like she's gonna die jumping out of an airplane or something, right? And then you think of like old Dr. Sprague, quiet spoken guy, really thoughtful. He's just gonna like die in his sleep reading the encyclopedia.
Or by slow molasses death.
Yeah.
Yeah, interesting.
Right.
Another
And
question
Karen,
for the audience.
now I'm remembering it because he would do that. He'd go up into that area.
Octagon. Yeah.
Yeah. And he'd smoke his pipe. And so
Yes.
I remember it. At one point I thought, oh, he's going to burn himself up. He's going to fall asleep and his pipe will start the fire. So that was a foreshadowing, but it wasn't. It was just combustion. Okay. So what do you think about Mayhem Truitt? Like, what were your initial impressions? We first see him on page 134, if you want a reference, but yeah, what did you think of him?
I was sure that he was
Yeah.
a fraud.
Yeah, scammer
Sure.
all the
But
way.
then he had the
Blimey.
like, Bible or something that had Bertha's handwriting. in
Yes.
it. So that now I
Yeah.
just don't know. But
Yeah.
and I have not read ahead, so no spoilers. But
We won't give it away.
Yeah,
I was sure that
scammer.
he's
I'm
just a
trying
fraud.
not to give any spoilers, but like
Yeah.
he just seemed like when he showed up into town, he seemed like
Yeah.
a used car salesman guy
Yeah.
to me. Like he saw this thing in the paper
Yes.
that like there's some sort of inheritance. He's like, it's been there for a while, nobody else has done it. How are they gonna know?
Yeah.
Just like, let me go try and pretend to be this guy.
But he has the receipts to
Mhm.
show that.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's
But-
a mystery we will discuss in a couple of weeks. But yeah, definitely initial impressions are, oh, this guy's the worst. And he gets worse as time goes on. Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
really nothing good about him. So that leads into another question about relationships, which we talked a little bit about, but in particular, relationships with gender. So relationships among women, and then relationships among men, and then relationships among men and women. Like there's a lot of dynamics here, but let's start with relationships of men and women and the treatment of women. And an example of that dynamic is the relationship between Louetta and Moses Mood. And so I don't know if you remember that relationship, but
I think kind of in general, it seemed typical of like the time period to me. Like it seemed accurate to like what, we've all heard about, like what kind of relationships were like in a household between a husband and a wife, like generally in that time period. So I didn't like read into it too much, but then there's definitely some little like spicy bits that she threw in there.
well, Louetta, I think the interesting part here is that she's an athlete, right? Like she's really good at what she does. And that, of course, is, well, I mean, I think a threat, to her husband.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting, she took kind of, you felt like the bowling alley, and she probably even said this, it was like the only place she could really be herself, that Bertha really gave her and probably other women a place to go where they didn't have to worry about what they looked like or what people were going to think, or kind of brought that maybe that confidence that they probably had to leave at the bowling alley when they left. But yeah, and so I could see Louetta start to realize like, oh, it's okay that I don't necessarily want to be with Moses Mood for the rest of my
Fit
life.
this like
Right.
housewife ideal.
Right.
yeah, that's
And
in addition to this space that Bertha provides, like physically that space, but I think she was also like clearly a role model and sort of demonstrated to Louetta that there was a different way to be a woman in society. It was edgy at the time, right? Like Bertha was, I think people let her get away with it because she was like a quirky person. They're like, oh, she's just weird. But I think it empowered Louetta, right, to like consider that there was another path for her.
Yeah,
Right,
because
and
I noticed too, because it said women bowled right out in the open. That was the text that was written in there. And I was like, this is like a bit of a rebellion, like a silent protest. Like,
Mhm.
we're going to bowl, we're going to wear what we want to wear, and you can't judge us. This is our safe place, our safe space, whatever you want to call it. But
Right.
And it's where we can, I guess, and then I was like, oh, this is where you go and bowl away your troubles. Like,
Mhm.
I'm like, oh, okay, I
Bowl
could
away.
see that. Like, I'm gonna bowl away. Like, okay, now I gotta
Yeah.
seeing it tied
So
together.
that you may not have gotten there, but that is what he finally names Bowlaway about, to bowl away your troubles. Or did you get to that point? Okay, yeah. There's a reference later on where that's why he named it Bowlaway, to bowl away your troubles.
Ah,
Um,
yeah, but
so
that is, I really liked Bertha from the beginning because she was like, I don't care what people think about me. I'm gonna wear my skirt or whatever it is, and ride my bike, and whatever. So I think that was like early on what kind of was like, yes, you go, Bertha.
Yeah.
and I think that's the whole out of time thing too, where she's dropped
Mhm.
out of time and the sort of mythical, because she really, it's almost like it's not that she's rebelling, it's just that she just doesn't care. Like she's
Mhm.
opening it up. This is the way it should be, and she is not influenced by those cultural,
Cultural
misconceptions.
norms and
all right.
Yeah.
One thing I did pick up too was she designed a house that they lived in. Like he like say, I don't understand. I'm a doctor, but I don't understand, this architecture stuff you go for. And so he leaned on her. And so it said Bertha designed a house. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Mhm.
So why do you think, like, what's with the octagon? Why?
Yeah.
she's just a weird person. She's
Yeah.
just like, how can I be different? Like, I don't want a house like any of these other people in town. I think she's
Why
kind
does
of
it
one
have
of
to have
those
4
ones
sides?
like, yeah,
Yeah.
let's get some more.
I think
So-
there's gonna be some symbolism there. I'm waiting for
Yeah.
it. Something with 8.
Mhm.
It comes up again. I don't know that it's resolved, but it does come up
Yeah.
again.
Mhm.
Okay, so then Mayhem, our friend Mayhem, challenges Luetta to a bowling match. What did you, before reading it, like, how did you think it was going to go?
Oh, I was like, good, he is gone. We are going to be
Yeah.
done with
Yeah.
him. Hit the road.
Yeah.
She's going to run. She's going to take over the world. Her and
Yeah.
Joe Ware and Jephthah.
Yeah.
No.
Mhm.
Mhm.
I was even skimming back through it before this session, and I still don't understand what Jephthah was doing. Like, I don't know if he ever says what was he thinking. Like, he seemed to love Luetta, obviously.
Mhm.
So why did he turn on her? Anyway, couldn't
Yeah,
believe
they
that.
do address it. It comes back again. Jephthah returns, but there's the last sort of part of this novel, she wraps a lot of stuff up, and the stories of those, what we sort of feel are minor characters, we get some resolution and some answers to them.
They're like, here, they're back.
Yeah, I'll just say this, like, one of the questions in the guide is like, who's the hero or heroine of the story? And it's, clearly when we first start reading it, it's Bertha, but she's done in, like, I don't know, the first 50 pages or something like that. She's dead. So maybe not that short, but so my feeling is there really is no single hero and no minor character in this story. Like, there is a lot of time that gets spent on Joe Ware and Jephthah, that really is fascinating backstories. So those sorts of things get resolved. But
I think the way, and kind of going back to the choosing Candlepin thing, I think there's something really like human about the way that she describes the bowling alley. Like, almost that is like the central hub, like, of the story. Like, everyone's relationships revolve around either they met at the bowling alley, they've owned the bowling alley at some point, they've So it's kind of like seems like the central hub to me, that everything,
Yep.
even though it didn't come up until she created it, but that was pretty early on. So it seems like
That is definitely
it all always goes back to
Yeah.
the bowling alley.
We'll discuss that a lot in a couple of weeks, because it is the central piece. In a lot of ways, it's a central character, and how people are affected by it is a major part in the third part of the novel.
Right. And it goes through so many iterations. It's like how it affects you depends on at what time period you interacted with the bowling alley.
Right. So the Bertha doll, do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
So what are your thoughts on the doll?
I couldn't tell if that, like,
Well,
when
first
Leviticus-
let's tell us, Gordon, like what the doll, how it came to be, if
right.
you remember.
So after Bertha died, Leviticus went to Joe Ware and asked him to make like the body of Bertha like at a smaller scale out of wood, and then he was going to make the head. And like I was still trying to like picture this even when Joe Ware was like describing it. Well, I think it's interesting, like when she switches to that perception of Joe Ware, I'm like, where's all my details at? Like, Joe, come on, man. And he's just like, it was this thing, it was like this thing. I was like, I need more, because I still can't picture it. And I don't, is that the same like effigy that's the doll later on that they like?
Yes.
Okay, I thought it was some different like random doll that just popped up. I didn't know that one was Bertha. Because I was imagining like more of a statue, like shorter statue
it's a
type
doll.
thing.
Yeah.
Again,
Hey,
Bertha
Mother.
never dies. Bertha never dies.
Right.
I had wondered the same thing. I had assumed it was the same thing that like Joe Ware had carved, and then they had made the head for. But I also wasn't sure. But yeah, I thought it was hilarious. They just wake up and he's like rubbing this doll, like.
Right. So, and it is big. You're right, Gordon, because on 189. They talk about when Arch found the doll. Roy had been that sort of child, at least when it came to the physical, but here was Arch, butter blonde and blithe and laughing. Even so, when they found him at 4 in bed asleep with the doll, they assumed Roy, then 5, was to blame. That doll was as big as Arch, bigger. How could he have carried it there without the sound of her wooden heels against the wooden floor? Margaret was standing over the bed, was the one who discovered the child and the doll. The doll's head was on the pillow next to Arch's, though face up. His lips were at her neck. So why would Arch be so drawn to this? Well, I don't know. I mean, I would say kind of creepy figure.
Ooh, there's a lot of childhood psychology in that.
Yeah, maybe.
I mean, there was like definitely the like vastly different dynamic, especially early on with Arch and Roy. Like they're completely different kids growing up. And so I was like, oh, and at the time I didn't realize it was that Bertha doll. So I thought, it's just like a doll. Like, what's the big deal? Like they're just being like toxic masculinity in the 40s or whatever it was, right?
Oh, okay.
I was like, let the kids sleep with the doll, man. It's not that big of a deal.
Right.
And then like now that I realize it's Bertha, I'm just like, man, that thing's haunted. This is like a ghost. Like this creepy doll just walking around.
It does keep coming back. That's not the last that we will see of the Bertha doll.
There's a comment in the chat too, Emil.
Oh, thanks. Let's read it. Emily says, regarding the Bertha doll, our reading group talked about how this was like the way saints would be preserved. Oh, she becomes a relic. bowling pin leg and then her molasses teeth preserves her. Oh my gosh. She is sort of the saint of the town, unknowable, worshipped, fear, awe-evoking, etc. Wow, that's great. Yeah.
Mhm.
And it is, I think the relic is the proper word here.
I think it says a lot, like how much of an impact she had, because like she just randomly shows up, and then like how long was she really in that town? Like in the like construct of the timeline of the book, it doesn't seem, it's what, maybe like 15 years, which in a town where everybody's like born there and dies there, this is the one person that everybody's still talking about 50 years later.
So let's, I realize that I kind of jumped a little bit over into the last part, but let's wrap it up. I just want to hear any additional comments from that section or the parts of the book. Did anything kind of jump out at you that you, really stood out in terms of descriptions or story, or any characters that you were really drawn to? We didn't really discuss Margaret Benetton, Benetton Truitt, which is an interesting character because she gets together, marries Nahum, who's a despicable character. But we can talk about that, or are there any other characters or story plot lines that you want to hit before we close for this section?
Well,
I don't want to do a spoiler alert.
With the Margaret, like when Art is cuddled up next to the doll, it reminded me of like that experiment that someone did a long time ago with like the monkeys, where they took them away from their mother and then they gave them like the wire monkey with the food, and then the cloth monkey, and that they would see like which ones the monkeys would go and cuddle with, and it was like the one that didn't have the food. And so I was like, well, maybe like that speaks to Margaret as a mother, like you'd rather cuddle with like this wood creep doll, because she was this orphan who didn't know how to, I don't know, I made probably a lot of assumptions, but that was one of the things that I thought when I was reading the doll.
Which is ironic because Margaret is so desperate for love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I thought it was like kind of like I questioned how she and Nahum came to like be married. Like she was like so obsessed with that family, and like she wanted to be part of it. She wanted to like be Minna's mom, right? That's when we thought she was gonna like kidnap her. And I was like, did she like seek this guy out just to like get an in and then be able to say that she was Minna's, like, what would it be? I guess cousin, step cousin.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what I assumed, and I'm not past. You guys are a little ahead of me, but that's what I assumed is why she married him, was just because she talked earlier in the book about like wanting so badly to be Minna's mother, and so like that's pretty much as close as she could get at this point, right? To really connect herself, tie herself to that family. So I assume that that's 100% the reason she did it. It was worth being married to this horrible person to like connect herself to Minna that closely.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah.
I don't know what all do we know about Joe Ware in the first part, because the other thing was something that like really stood out to me about Joe Ware, but I don't remember what part of the book that was in. I don't want to spoil it.
Can you say that again? Sorry, I'm trying to type while you're saying that.
We find out,
I think I know what you're referring to.
Find out something about Joe Ware, and I don't know
his past.
It's in the first part, I think.
I think it's the last chapter.
When it clicked in my brain that Joe Ware was gay.
Yes.
That's in the first part.
Yeah. Okay. So that was one that I, also thought was very like reflective of the time period. I kind of like, I felt sorry for the guy. I was like, man, he's can't live his truth, right? In this time, this day, and all of the different feelings that he was going through, and trying to push him away, this man that was the love of his life, and then he finds out that he died in the Molasses thing with Bertha, and he never got like that closure. He hadn't said his name out loud in 25 years or whatever it was. I was like, man, in one day, this guy lost like basically his whole family, like his life, two main characters in it.
Yeah, and that just generally seems to be a thread, right? At least in this first part, that many of the characters can't live their, like, be their full selves and live, you know, live their truth in the society that they're in, right? Luetta's in the same position. Leviticus seems to be like doing pretty well, all things considered, but
except what I think is ironic is that Bertha would tell him a lot of times, like, you can't cry for a cat like that, or you can't drink, you can't smoke, you can't do, like, so in a way she was like not letting Leviticus be himself. Like, let him cry for a cat. It's fine.
And don't forget they were in interracial relationships. So when they were in public, they had to walk side by side.
Right.
They couldn't hold hands. They couldn't do those things. So it was a lot of, I guess, repression.
Yeah.
And I think that that's what's interesting about this story is that you could almost miss it. Like interracial relationships, you know, gender identity, sexual identity. There's so much going on, but it's just interwoven into the story that it is like, you got to pay attention. That's a big part of this.
I mean,
this
I think
novel.
that
like,
part of it like feels like a breath of fresh air to me, that like it is so normalized in there that if you weren't paying attention, like sometimes you may forget, but then when you kind of reflect on it, you think of Dr. Sprague, like how many Black doctors were there back then? Like he walked to the next town to practice his medicine. They talk about him walking everywhere. I probably walk everywhere too if, you know, I got treated the way that I did on the bus system or whatever it was then. And then this whole like being from Canada thing, just kind of, I was like, I don't know anything about Canada. You Wisconsin people probably know a lot about Wisconsin and Minnesota. That's basically Canada.
Yeah.
all right, let's close it up for this session. We'll continue where we left off in a couple of weeks. For the people attending, make sure you spread the word, especially for people who want to ask questions of the author for the third and final session. But this is a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying this. Thank you so much for the engaging discussion. And I will see you all in a couple of weeks. Thank you.
bye, see you next
Bye-bye.
time.